And if you could, when you have a chance, drop the link to your YouTube, I'd love to be able to watch the others.
Yes, I'd be very happy to. Actually, I have your email address because you signed up. You gave me your email address, and I will send you the link to my YouTube channel. I'll send it to
Oh,
the other
wonderful.
people who signed up as well who didn't show up tonight. But that's
Perfect.
pretty
Thank you.
normal. Lots of people sign up and then they want the recording or they want access or something like that. And that's just how we do marketing these days. So,
Yeah.
in my agenda tonight, in talking about how to try and manage and work through workplace conflict, I'm really focused, like the name of my organization, in trying to help people understand the other person. And as I think about the kinds of people that are in the union that you've described, when they find themselves in conflict situations, I think that trying to understand the other person and work towards how they can communicate well with that person that they now understand in a new way, they're going to have more successful communication and be able to work to better conflict resolution with those people. Oftentimes, when we're in conflict with somebody else, we think that what we understand and know is the right way or is the better way. And we have a tendency to not search out or understand the other person in the context that they're in because we think that we already know and understand what's best. And the difficulty is that when somebody else in our scenario feels like they're not being listened to or they're not being heard, then they will also have trouble hearing somebody else.
Mm.
And when we want to be heard, the very first step that we should do in order to try to be heard is to listen to the other party. Um, I remember when I first went to the Middle East, one of the first proverbs that I heard from somebody is make a friend before you need a friend. And this helped me in my understanding that if I actually wanted some help from somebody in the future, if I was able to provide something for that person before I needed help, then in my time of need, I could come to that person and I could expect that I would receive from them because they'd already received something from me. And it's basically the same thing in communication, that when we begin by working towards trying to understand the other party, then that other party is going to be, they're going to, first of all, they're going to feel like they're being heard. And then they're going to want to be able to share and hear from you as well. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So in
Absolutely.
my agenda tonight, all I put down are these three things: putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So trying to understand their situation, and then doing some acknowledgement, which is basically a recognition that you are understanding the other person's scenario, that you've been in their shoes, or you know what it's, you're imagining what it's like to be in their shoes, and then expressing some empathy towards that other person, which is trying to connect with them on an emotional level about what their situation is like. So I'm just going to present some material about these three things. And then what we can do is we can just talk about your situations, your examples, and talk through some of those conflict situations. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, great. So putting yourself in the other person's shoes, the first thing what you want to do is you want to also make sure that you've come to peace with your own situation. It's really hard to try and imagine somebody else's situation if you're not sort of understanding, well, what am I faced with? So you have to be
Mm-hmm.
able to uh, learn to appreciate and understand the context of your own situation before you're ready to be able to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. That might mean you have to come to terms with your past. You might have to come to terms with your present. And you basically want to be able to take those things and move them out of your mental space. So that gives you some room to be able to cope with trying to understand what the other person's situation is like. And for everybody, that's going to look different, uh, how you come to peace with your own situation. But that might be personal awareness. It might be trying to understand what are the emotions that you're experiencing in the particular situation that you're in. It might be trying to find some time to talk to somebody else about what you're experiencing because you want to be able to make sure that those things that are holding you down, that are weighing you down, that are taking your time and your attention away. You want to have those dealt with to some extent so that you have the room to be able to talk to the other person about their situation. You want to make sure that you're going to examine what the context of the other party is. And this is a really important part of understanding their situation. You have to think about their background. You have to think about what are the pressures that they're dealing with. You have to think about what has their family situation been or their prior work situation. Maybe there are some personal stresses that they're experiencing as a result of family pressures or situations, and they might bring these into the workplace. And if you don't understand what some of that context is, that's going to make it difficult for you to understand what their situation is. In the modern times, sometimes there are different perceptions about how much should we be aware of somebody's personal situation when they bring it into the workspace. And a lot of people like to think of, well, we should be separating our personal space from our workspace. You know, like what's going on in your home is not important to me. However, my personal perspective is whatever's going on in somebody's home, that's going to be top of mind for them. And if they've got a really intense situation that they're dealing with at home, how am I going to expect that they're going to be able to bring their best selves here to this place? And so when I think about HR situations in the workplace, or somebody who's trying to be supportive of somebody, they want to be aware of what's going on for somebody in their home situation, because they want them to be able to bring themselves fully and completely into the workspace. And they're not going to be able to do that until some of their personal situations are at least acknowledged, or, you know, people are aware of them. I don't expect that people are going to deal with everybody's personal situations at work, but those factors are going to impact what's happening to them in the workplace. And then you want to understand what those factors are that are impacting the other party in their decision making in the workplace, because that context that they're experiencing is going to change their decision making in the workplace. So as I think about your employees, the people who are part of your union, when they come into their workplace, they are going to be bringing personal situations in, and those personal situations are going to be affecting their ability to make good decisions in the workplace where they are. As a union rep, you also want to be aware of what is the employer doing in order to try and support those workers as they're coming into those places. I don't know those contexts very well. I don't know, maybe you want to share an example right now that you're dealing with that might help us better talk about putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So as the education coordinator, are you providing education to the staff as to how they need to be interacting with the membership, or are you providing education to both the staff and to the membership, or only to the membership?
So I do education to both members and staff, and it looks differently depending on, so like on the staff side, it's for like staff development, right? So like helping them be good at their jobs. Like I was sharing with you before, one of the trainings I'm currently literally working on right now is time management, right? So teaching them how to better manage their time. We'll do trainings on emotional intelligence and all kind of stuff, and eventually we'll do one on conflict resolution. But I also have this other component about social and racial justice, so they get trainings from me on that as well. On the member side, it's about leadership development for how they can be better leaders in their union, right? Because it's their union and they need to lead it, and they do. But then also they're also getting that social and racial justice training as well.
Right. That sounds like a complex place to be, and there's a lot,
Yeah,
there's a lot that you have to be able to think through and process, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand what kind of education is going to be useful for them, what's going to help propel them and develop them as leaders. Kudos to
definitely.
you. Yeah. Um, what are some of the challenges? I mean, as I think through your staff and your membership, I'm thinking, what is it like for some of your staff to try and put themselves into the place of their members so that they can interact with them on appropriate levels?
Mm-hmm. Um, being mindful that a lot of them are working extremely long hours. So like for our home care providers, many of them, the majority of them are family home care providers, meaning the person they're providing care for is someone in their family. So you really don't have an end to that. You know what I mean? Like where you and
Yeah,
I might be able to end our jobs at, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever. If your work is caring for someone in your home that's living with a disability or, you know, um, a chronic illness, or they're aging and need or require the care, you don't get to stop at 5 p.m. if they now need medication at 8 p.m. or they need to be bathed at 8 or fed at 7. And
right,
so I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. And then on the family childcare provider side, that some of these family childcare providers are 24 hours operational because of the nature of the parents' work.
right,
So,
right.
keeping that in mind too, like these are folks, our members are some incredible folks who are doing some amazing work, who are also probably extremely tired.
Hmm.
Um, and just, devalued not just by the state, but across the nation too. And fighting to keep their homes, fighting to be able to keep their lights on and food in their refrigerators and stuff like that. So those are probably all things that, staff have to consider, especially when there's conflict.
Right, right. Okay, so acknowledgement was the next thing on my agenda. And as I'm hearing what you're saying, I'm thinking, how is it that we could respond in terms of thinking like you and your staff who are working in the office for the union? How is it that you can respond to some of your members in their needs uh, for those members to feel like the union staff actually understand the situation that they're in? And I think an acknowledgement can play a huge part in that. Whenever I find myself in a situation of conflict, usually there's some burden that's inside of me. There's some unfairness or some injustice that I sense that I'm experiencing. And I really want to be able to express that. I want somebody to hear what I'm experiencing that makes me feel like I'm being treated unfairly or unjustly.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we're in a conflict situation and we actually try and explore what is it that you're looking for in order for this conflict to be resolved. Sometimes people will look for an apology. Sometimes people will look for some reconciliation or restitution that should be paid on the part of the other person that they feel like they've been treated unjustly by. And sometimes when it gets right down to it, one of the parties might say, well, actually, all I really want is for recognition or acknowledgement of what I've experienced. And when we, if you think of the example of going into a store and going to customer service because you purchased a product or a service and it hasn't performed the way that you expected that was going to be performed. You go into customer service because you want to express your displeasure. And if the people at customer service don't have the ability to be able to listen to you and acknowledge you for what you're expressing to them, you're going to continue to try and tell them the same thing over and over again until you feel like somebody on the other end is actually listening to you. And acknowledgement as a tool of what's happening in a communication scenario is very powerful in being able to help the person who's expressing themselves to be able to change the temperature in the room. So normally when people are emotionally charged, they're going to have a certain sense of volume or projection that's going to come out of that. And oftentimes we want to mirror that. This is our natural inclination when we are finding ourselves in a conflict situation. We want to bring the same temperature up in our reply. And so somebody at the customer service desk, if they're not really trained well in customer service or in listening skills, they're going to return the same volume. And this is how conflicts just continue to escalate. And if
Mm-hmm.
the person who's responding can actually keep the temperature down here and do that intentionally, what will happen is they will actually create a mirroring of the first party who will eventually bring their own temperature down as well because this person is staying calm. So trying to stay calm and relaxed in that kind of atmosphere as you're responding to somebody who's up here is going to help bring that person down. But acknowledgement is actually recognizing a specific something that somebody else has either done or they felt or they've experienced. And so it's very important just to ask yourself, what has this other party done, or what have they felt, or what have they experienced that I could recognize? Because if I can recognize that for them now, they're going to actually feel heard by me, and it's going to bring their temperature down, and we're going to be able to have a constructive conversation about it. But if I don't do that acknowledgement piece, they're going to still feel like they're not being heard, and they're going to want to continue on at that same emotional level. And when they're at that emotional level, it's a sense that our primary instincts of fight or flight are engaged, and the blood
Mm-hmm.
goes to our body, to all different parts of our body. It goes out of our logic, which is located at this part of our brain, and the stuff that's in the back here in our primitive brain is what's really taking over, and the emotions then are what going to drive the conversation. And so we really want to be able to acknowledge some of those emotions. We want to acknowledge the pain. We want to acknowledge maybe contributions that they've made that have been positive towards the situation, because that acknowledgement is going to help to bring that emotional temperature down. In addition, we want to I want to acknowledge that acknowledgement doesn't require that we actually agree with the feelings of the other person. So we might disagree with the place that they've come to. We might disagree with the conclusions that they've made. But if we can at least acknowledge what's happened for them, then there will be a temperature change for them. They will relax a little bit when we start to acknowledge the scenario that they've been through. Acknowledgement is a way of demonstrating to the other party, explicitly or not, that you have some idea of what it's like to be in their shoes. Can you think of an example where somebody has acknowledged you and it's changed how you felt? Yeah, something that brings you together that you both shared, and it makes you feel like we're sharing something in common. We've been fighting the same battle, and it's moving away from the oppositional to being on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you are experiencing that sense of being cut off by this other party that you're in conflict with, have you ever been able to express what that does for you in your interactions? I brought some examples as well that we could use to talk about and just see where a point of acknowledgement can take place. Rachel and Mark are colleagues at a marketing firm. They've been assigned to work on a project together. Rachel has been feeling overwhelmed with her workload and tells Mark that she needs some help. So this is a very simple example.
Mm-hmm.
You might even have employees or members or other staff that come to you with similar sentiments.
Staff for sure.
What do you think that in this particular example, what could Mark say to Rachel that might be a statement of acknowledgement?
Um, that, feeling overwhelmed is not specific to one person. Many of us feel overwhelmed, and that she's not alone,
Okay. Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Normalizing how she feels about that is really helpful.
Mhm.
That's great. Here's another example. A group of coworkers are in a meeting, and one of them, Alex, suggests an idea that is immediately shot down by the rest of the group. So let's say Alex comes and talks to you after the meeting. What could you say to Alex in that particular scenario after the meeting?
Um, I could say that, I actually like the idea, if that's true, and that, I'm sorry that that happened. And if it was the way that he presented the idea, I would offer help in like, hey, I'm willing to workshop with you how to reintroduce this idea in a way that might land.
Excellent. That would make Alex feel like you actually care about him as a coworker and that you want him to be able to succeed. That would be especially empowering for him. Uh, Even if Alex comes to you afterwards and all you did was say, "Hey, Alex, I noticed what happened today in that meeting, and I just wanted you to know that there are other people that are aware that you presented an idea, and it's like it wasn't even given, the time that it deserves." That,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just acknowledging that, letting Alex know that somebody else has seen that or witnessed it is very powerful. Um, in the First Nations communities, I live up in Canada, and there's a lot of wisdom now that's actually coming out of Indigenous communities. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I have learned as a practice in conflict resolution comes from an Indigenous tradition where they have a listening circle.
Mm-hmm.
Listening circles are very powerful, but they're unlike anything that I've ever seen in a non-Indigenous space, unless people are intentionally trying to use this kind of conflict resolution technique. And a listening circle is simply an opportunity for people to gather together, where in that listening circle, all you're going to do is you're each going to go around the circle and you're going to share with the group whatever it is that you want to share. Nobody else is going to respond to what you've said. Nobody is going to address it. Nobody is going to brainstorm with you. Nobody is going to even say a word about anything that you've said. But all of those people that are there in that circle are there to be witnesses or testifiers of what you have to present. And what this does is this lets everybody in that circle know somebody is listening to me. Somebody is here that values hearing what I have to say. And it provides a sense of validation that me
Mm-hmm.
as an individual is important. And all it is the witness aspect, the testimony aspect. And it's not even this acknowledgement piece that I'm trying to present here. You sit down in a circle and somebody just shares whatever. It could be one sentence or it could be several paragraphs, a testimony of your experience or your own personal story. And the power of listening to others and caring for them and giving them that dignity piece is extremely, I don't know, it releases something in people and makes people feel like I am valuable. I am, people care about me. I am important. Because until they have that opportunity to actually say what they want to say for somebody else to listen to, they might actually feel like what I have to say isn't important. Nobody really cares about me. And this isn't, I'm just feeling like I have no value. And all that listening circle does is demonstrate the dignity of every person that's present there and that we are actually here because we want to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing that I wanted to present was on empathy. And empathy is basically taking acknowledgement and it's going one step further than acknowledgement, but it's also demonstrating that you have the ability to actually understand what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. Um, Another writer, Michael Sahota, has this wonderful little graphic that I've just borrowed to be able to talk about what these different elements of empathy are. First of all, we're seeing their world. We recognize that we're paying attention to it. We appreciate them as human beings without any judgment. We actually understand their feelings. And for some people, this could be the most difficult part because you have to have a particular level of emotional intelligence yourself in order to be able to understand and project what the feelings of somebody else are. And then the last piece is that you're actually communicating understanding of those things to the person that you're talking to. And if somebody is not emotionally mature enough to actually understand feelings for themselves, they won't be able to practice empathy. So you have to know your own feelings in order to be able to understand what the feelings are of other people. And some people are very challenged this way because they don't have that emotional intelligence. They can't even figure out their own feelings. And so they're not going to be able to understand the feelings of other people. So sometimes when people come into me for conflict resolution direction or for doing some coaching or something like that, I might spend some time with them individually, just talking about, for example, an emotion wheel. You have experience with an emotion wheel?
I've used it before, years ago in my work, and where was I working at? A family drop-in center. So this was some time ago, well over a decade ago.
Right. So I will give emotion wheels to clients so that they can
Hmm.
see the diversity of emotions that we can experience, even if they don't have the ability to be able to define or express what those are. When they look at an emotion wheel and they're trying to express how they're feeling in a particular situation, they might pinpoint two very, very specific new emotions that they probably sense because, of course, everybody senses these emotions in their body, but they can't put words to them. And then they can actually express those because now we've given them the vocabulary to be able to do that. And when they understand their own feelings, this is actually going to be able to enhance their ability to be able to empathize with other people. When you can empathize with somebody, you're going to build a stronger connection with that individual. And when you're building stronger connections, then you're going to likely be able to work towards a resolution to the conflict that you're experiencing, or at least a better understanding with each other, which is going to build better team between you and the other person. So there is a difference between empathy and sympathy. And just to give you some examples, there's a fellow named Daniel Goleman who's written a book called Emotional Intelligence. And he says that empathy involves the ability to sense the feelings of others and to take their perspective, while sympathy involves feeling concern or compassion for others, but doesn't necessarily involve understanding their perspective. And so empathy is that one step that's much further than sympathy because it demonstrates to people not only do you feel something for them, but you actually understand their perspective. In order for us to be able to empathize with somebody, we actually have to examine the context of the other party. We have to know what it is, and we have to be able to express what we understand that other party is experiencing. Because if we don't understand that context, we're not going to be able to empathize with them. And we want to consider the factors that are impacting the other party in their decision making as we are working towards empathizing with them. So these are some exercises that I put together just to try and maybe work through some of these different aspects of acknowledgement and empathy. I don't know if you want to work through one of these exercises with me, that would be great. If you think that there's an example that you'd like to give from your own workplace that we could talk about, we could do that instead.
Yeah, we can work through one of these together.
Okay. John and Emily are working on a marketing campaign for a new product launch. John has a more conservative approach, while Emily is more daring with her ideas. They're having trouble agreeing on the direction of the campaign. John says, I understand that we want to be innovative, but we also need to make sure that our message resonates with our target audience. we should focus on the key features of the product and emphasize how it can solve our consumers' pain points. Emily says, I agree, but I also think that we need to stand out from our competitors. We can't just do the same thing they're doing. Let's think outside the box and come up with something that's fresh and exciting. So here in this particular circumstance, if you were John, how might you be able to respond to Emily after she's shared this with him?
Sorry, one second. I'm just reading it again.
Mm.
So if we were Emily, sorry, if we were John, how would we respond to Emily?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, I would tell her I also agree that we do want to stand out from our competitors because we don't want to do the same thing they're doing. Otherwise, how are we competing with them now? We're just copying them, which would eliminate us eventually in the long run. Um, and I welcome the opportunity to think outside the box, but we also need to keep in mind how we stay in business, and that is our customers. So we need to approach this from a place of balance where we're holding both our customers' pain points, but also thinking outside of the box.
Right. This is what you presented is a very, very useful idea. There's a wonderful book. I can't think of who the authors are right now, but the book is called Both and it's about the idea of trying to hold two
Two
perspectives
things. Yes. Sorry,
that
that's my thing. Yeah.
okay, that's great. And we're really what we're trying to do is open up our minds so that we can ask ourselves, how can we actually achieve this and this together? How can we do both of them? And we don't have to think of them as being competing ideas, but let's put them together to see what kind of a creative idea that we can have that will enable us to reach both of those goals in a new way, which is essentially what innovation is. Innovation is, thinking of two different things that connect in a new way with each other that somebody else hasn't thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so somebody, and one of the reasons why people have difficulty with this is that because we think that the pie is limited and everybody is worried about their piece of the pie. So because we're afraid that if I don't protect my piece of the pie, that I'm going to lose, and we end up in a lose-lose, or I have to win. If I'm winning, you're going to lose, or if you win, I'm going to lose. And we want to change our perspective so that we understand, well, actually, we can think of this as a win-win-win scenario. How can we do this and do this at the same time? Two children, for example, who get a dessert together, there's one piece of cake or one piece of pie, and they're fighting over who's going to get it. And instead of thinking of the idea of we each maybe only get half the pie, or only one of us gets the whole piece of pie, as they fight over it, the pie might actually end up on the floor because they're arguing with each other so much. Whereas they might think of something a little bit more creative and say, well, let's add something to this. Maybe we can add some ice cream to the pie or the cake, and that actually makes the dessert bigger than what it was. And it will enable both of us to be satisfied with what we're getting because we've now created something new that's going to actually satisfy both of us. And our creativity is really important in that. So we have to have open minds to be able to try and pursue something like this.
Yeah, I always tell people I operate in the both and. I never feel like I try to do with the binary of either or as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because there's so much gray in this world, and we need to be as flexible as possible and consider many ideas, many people at the same time. So it's a place that I love operating in, and I truly believe we can produce better outcomes if more people like held right that belief. And it's also too like two things can be true at once as well, right? It doesn't always have to be that either or.
Yes. I'm just trying to find the name of the authors of the book. I do a lot of listening to books. There it is. Wendy Smith and Marianne Lewis and Amy Edmondson. Both and Thinking, Embracing Creative Tensions to Solve Your Toughest Problems. I'll stick that in the follow-up email.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had no
Um,
clue there was a book in it.
yeah, it's a great book that really pushes people to stop and ask themselves, how can I incorporate what I'm hearing from this person that sounds like something that's so opposite to what I'm thinking with what I'm thinking so that we can try and accomplish both of those together. And I would imagine that in your workspace, that could be very powerful, especially when
Hmm.
you're talking about people who are coming from different socioeconomic classes or people who are coming from different family backgrounds or people who are coming from, I don't know, is it even politically correct to say coming from different racial backgrounds?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
the context that they're coming from is so different. And if they don't feel like the person on the other side is actually willing to listen to what that context might be like for them, then they will feel like, I'm just, it's like throwing a penny at a brick wall. You're never going to make any progress. Nobody's listening. And you want to feel like somebody actually cares about who you are as a person and what kind of a context that you've come from in order to be able to have a conversation with you that's valuable.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know whether or not this exercise is going to be terribly useful. There was a third one that I came up with, but I'd actually be willing to talk about a particular scenario if you've got one that you want to talk about in your workplace. So this particular member, I would imagine that the first thing that I would want to do for this member is let him feel like I'm sitting here and I'm listening to what he has to say, and that what he has to say is important to me. So this is where the acknowledgement is really important.
Hmm.
And this is where empathy really comes in as well. Because obviously, if he's dissatisfied, um, then he needs to be heard. He needs to feel like somebody is actually concerned about his dissatisfaction. So I expect that there will be some more details, but even making a statement to him that's empathetic. And let me give you an example. I remember once hearing a psychologist talk about their training, and when they were an intern, so that period after they've done their formal education, but they actually haven't done any therapy for people, they were put into an internship situation where they are supervised as a therapist. And the supervisor in this particular circumstance told the counselor in training, you can listen to everybody, but you were only allowed to say one thing. You can't say anything else. You can't give people advice. You can't give them direction or anything. All you can do is use one sentence. And they gave them this formulaic sentence. And the sentence was essentially a sentence of empathy. And it had two blanks in it. It said, you must be feeling blank because of blank. And so that's all they did in their internship is they used this sentence of empathy to be able to express to the person who had come in for counseling what they thought that that person must be feeling. And so when this member comes in, uh, from the information that you've told me, I might be tempted to say something like, you must be feeling very frustrated because it feels like the money that you're paying isn't going to anything useful.
Hmm.
And so you're expressing in that statement of empathy to that member, I'm hearing, first of all, what your frustration is. And I believe that I understand what your frustration is about. And if you weren't right, the member would at least understand that you are trying to take in his perspective, and it would give him an opportunity to be able to clarify. And you can even ask by adding a little question tag at the end of that, is that right? And then that gives them the opportunity to confirm it, deny it, to add more to it. And as they add more, they're going to believe that they're going to be listened to, because you've already demonstrated that you are listening to them.
I like that too, because it creates an opening as well to like, they can respond, but then also say, you know, well, here's what I'm hearing, but then also, have you heard? It gives our staff an opportunity to say, like, have you heard about our most recent wins, right? Like, here is what we've been able to do together. We just increased wages for providers in this county by, X amount of dollars. And these are the recent benefits that we've won, right? So I like that because it provides an opening for more
Right.
dialogue.
And I just want to go back to something that I said earlier. Even though your staff are going to be ready to tell this member about all the wonderful things that your union has done for the membership, that member that's standing in front of the reception desk isn't going to be able to hear any of that until he feels like he's been heard by the union.
Okay.
And so the person at the desk might even be ready to say to him, your concerns are very important to me, and they're very important to this office. I'm just going to get my notebook here because I want to record these, or I'm just going to open up a document on my computer because I want to be able to capture all of the information that you're telling me so that I can pass it on to the appropriate person so they can respond appropriately to your concerns. And then as those are being recorded, the person at the reception desk is going to be telling the member, this is what I'm hearing from you. So first of all, what I heard from you is you have a sense that the union isn't doing enough to care for its members. Did I get that right? Or to say, that's what I heard you say. Is that what you meant to communicate? And then that gives them the opening to be able to confirm, deny, or to tell more. Now, if they're just saying things and they're so emotional and the person at the front desk isn't sure exactly how to respond, another phrase that's really useful is just 3 words: tell me more. And those 3 words communicate to the person who's bringing the complaint, 1, you're very, very important to me. I'm trying to understand what it is that you're expressing to me, but I need fuller understanding. So can you tell me more about that situation? And other very important active listening skills, which include things like paraphrasing and summarizing. I would imagine, Kim, you're familiar with those already in the position that you're in. Those are all really important skills that are going to be useful for somebody at the reception desk to incorporate with somebody who's coming in with a complaint. I'd love to be able to do a session for people who work at customer service, just to be able to help them express, this is what I'm hearing from you. Am I getting this right? Is there something that I'm missing? So that that person feels like so far what they've said has been heard, but that the person behind the desk is still interested in understanding more about what their pain is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I imagine as the education person that you have to spend quite a bit of energy trying to educate your members in what their role needs to be in the union, and understanding how that role will determine whether or not the union is going to be beneficial for them or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fabulous. That sounds like a good place to be, because you're actually there to try and help make people's lives easier and better, and be a voice for them, or amplify their voice when they feel like they're in a situation where their voice isn't being heard.
Yeah, for sure.
Just before we close up, Kim, do you have any other questions or comments that you want to ask?
I don't. I will say I'm happy that no one showed up, because I appreciate getting the one-on-one time. This was cool, and I was making some notes as we were going, and I just really appreciate you. You could have very easily said, "Well, no one else is here except for you, so we're going to go ahead and cancel," but you didn't. And I thank you for that, for not doing that.
You're very, very welcome. I'm glad that you enjoyed it and that it was useful for you. I will send you a follow-up email and I'll give you the link to my YouTube page and the book that I mentioned. I'll identify that as well. And if you've got other questions in the future, you can feel free to email me back.
Yeah.
For it, you can listen to it, and then you can tell me if you could cut out from minute 1907 to minute 2703, that would be great. And then
Thank you.
and I'll edit the video and then I'll post it publicly with that clip taken out.
Thank you so much. That is so kind.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much for joining me tonight, for taking some time out of your day to do this. And I wish you all the best as you help people who are doing such a good thing for other people and getting such little return for it. And I hope that you are able to communicate to them how valuable their service is to their families and to their communities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a great week.
Thank
I'll
you.
look for the email.
Okay. You take care.
You too. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.